I opened the text because I thought it was about dinner reservations. Instead, I called my attorney. My name is Daniel Carr, 29 years old, structural engineer, Denver, Colorado. Married for 4 years to my wife, a woman I met at a mutual friend's birthday party on a Tuesday night when I'd almost stayed home because I was tired and the weather was miserable and I had an early meeting the next morning. She was standing by the window with a glass of red wine, laughing at something someone had said, and I thought, that is the most effortless person I have ever seen. Her name was Melissa. Melissa Carr, now, by marriage. She taught elementary school art, 3rd grade. She came home with paint on her forearms 3 days out of 5. She left cabinet doors open. She could not parallel park to save her life and refused to admit it. For 4 years I had believed I understood exactly who she was. I was wrong in a way I still have trouble fully explaining to people, because the wrongness wasn't simple. It had layers. And by the time I found all of them, I understood that I had never met the woman I thought I'd married at all. It was a Saturday in March. Melissa was supposedly at her sister's place in Colorado Springs for the weekend. Her sister Lauren, who had a new baby and needed help, or so Melissa had explained Thursday evening while packing an overnight bag with the calm efficiency of someone who had rehearsed the reason. I'd kissed her goodbye Friday morning, told her to drive safe, watched her pull out of the driveway in her white Subaru. Normal Friday. I had my own plans. College friend visiting from Seattle, dinner out, maybe a late movie, nothing complicated. We'd had a good evening. My friend had left by 10, and I was on the couch with the television on low, not really watching it, half reading something on my phone the way you do when the week has wrung everything out of you. At 10:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. I assumed it was my friend saying he'd made it back to his hotel. I picked it up without looking at the contact name first. The message read, "The notary appointment is confirmed for Monday 9 a.m. Bring both copies and make sure the joint account screenshot is current. Should be clean by Tuesday if the wire clears." I stared at it for a long time. Long enough that the screen dimmed and I had to tap it awake again. Then I looked at the contact name. The message was from a number I didn't recognize. Not saved in my phone. But it hadn't been sent to a wrong number. It had been sent directly to me. My number. My phone. Whoever sent it knew exactly who they were contacting. I read it 3 more times. Notary appointment. Both copies. Joint account screenshot. Wire clears. Every word individually was ordinary. Together they formed something I couldn't immediately name but could feel the shape of the way you feel a room change temperature before you identify the source. I set the phone face down on my knee. I picked it back up. I typed, "Who is this?" I waited 40 seconds. The message showed delivered. No response came. I waited another 2 minutes. Nothing. I typed, "Wrong number?" Still nothing. The read receipt never appeared. Whoever it was had either seen my question, understood their mistake, and gone silent, or hadn't seen it yet. Either way, the message they'd sent me had already arrived. It was already sitting in my hand. I didn't call Melissa. I want to be clear about that, about the order of things, because people always ask. The reason I didn't call her immediately was not because I wasn't thinking about her. It was because something quiet and cold had settled over my thinking the moment I read that message, the kind of cold that doesn't come from panic but from the opposite of panic. From a very specific stillness, I knew, without being able to explain how, that calling her in that moment would be the wrong move. That it would accomplish nothing except alerting her that I'd seen something. So I sat with it instead. I sat with it for almost 20 minutes, turning it over, trying on different explanations. Maybe it was work-related. Something she hadn't mentioned. No, teachers don't have notary appointments on Monday mornings involving joint account screenshots and wire transfers. Maybe it was a surprise, something financial she was arranging without my knowledge, a gift, an investment, something she'd planned and wanted to reveal at the right moment. I held that possibility up to the light of the actual words. Should be clean by Tuesday. That phrase. Clean. Money people use the word clean in a very specific context, and it's not a context that belongs anywhere near a surprise anniversary fund. I went to my laptop. Pulled up our joint checking account. Balance normal. Nothing unusual in the last 2 weeks of transactions. Then I went to our joint savings. Also normal. I sat back. Then, following a sudden instinct I couldn't have explained in the moment, I opened the folder on my desktop where I kept our financial documents. Tax returns, mortgage statements, insurance policies. I scrolled down to a subfolder I hadn't opened in 4 months labeled LLC Docs. 18 months ago, Melissa and I had discussed starting a small side business together, an art supply subscription service she'd had the idea for. We'd formed the LLC, registered it in Colorado, split it 50-50. The business had never fully launched. We'd gotten busy, life had moved on, and the LLC had just sat there dormant as far as I knew, a plan that never became a thing. Except when I opened the folder, there were documents in it I did not recognize. Filings I had not signed. Operating agreement amendments dated 3 months ago. A document titled Change of Registered Agent dated 6 weeks ago. A bank account application under the LLC name that listed only Melissa as the authorized signer. None of these had my signature on them. Not my real signature, anyway. But there was a signature on the operating agreement amendment where my name appeared. It wasn't mine. Someone had signed my name and it wasn't me. I closed the laptop. Opened it again. Pulled the documents back up and went through each one slowly, the way you read something you're hoping will change meaning if you look long enough. It didn't change. The documents were real. The filings were real. The LLC we had formed together as a theoretical future project had been quietly converted, over the past several months, into something with a separate bank account, a new registered agent I didn't recognize, and my forged signature authorizing changes I had never agreed to. I didn't sleep that night. I'd like to say I stayed calm, but calm isn't the right word. I was functional. Precise, even. There's a version of shock that doesn't look like shock from the outside, that presents itself as a kind of preternatural focus. I moved through it room by room in my head, cataloging what I knew, what I suspected, what I needed to find out, the way I'd been trained to do structural assessments. You don't start with conclusions. You start with load points. By 1 a.m., I had a list. The text from the unknown number. The LLC documents. The forged signature. The notary appointment Monday morning. The wire transfer that was supposed to clear by Tuesday. And Melissa, in Colorado Springs, at her sister's, unavailable. I pulled up Lauren's Instagram. There was a photo posted 6 hours ago. Lauren alone with the baby, caption Saturday night chaos. No mention of Melissa visiting. No Melissa in the background. No Melissa anywhere. Sunday morning, I called my college roommate, a man I'll call my friend Jake, because his actual name belongs only to him. Jake had spent 8 years as a forensic accountant before moving into private consulting. He was the kind of person who, when you called on a Sunday morning and said, "I think something is very wrong and I need someone who knows what they're looking at," didn't ask you to explain yourself first. He just said, "Send me what you have. I'll come over." He was at my kitchen table by noon. He went through the LLC documents with the expression of someone reading a report they've seen variations of before. Not surprised. Identifying. He asked me twice to confirm I had never signed anything. I confirmed it both times. He pulled out his own laptop and started running searches I couldn't fully follow. 20 minutes passed. 30. He refilled his coffee without looking up. At the 40-minute mark, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me in a way that told me before he said a single word that what was coming would require me to be seated, which I already was. Fortunately, the LLC had been used to open a business bank account 2 months ago. That account had received 3 transfers in the past 6 weeks. 2 from our joint savings account, moved in amounts small enough not to trigger automatic alerts. The 3rd from my personal investment account, a brokerage account I checked maybe twice a year, money I'd inherited from my grandfather and essentially set aside and tried not to touch. $41,000 had moved out of it in 2 separate transactions, routed through the LLC account and then out again to a destination account Jake couldn't immediately identify. He circled a number on his notepad and pushed it across the table to me. I looked at it. Total outgoing, across all 3 sources over 6 weeks, $63,400. I looked at the number for a long time. Then I looked up at Jake and said, very quietly, that I had no knowledge of any of those transfers. He nodded once, like he had already assumed that. Then he said, "Someone used your credentials. Do you use a password manager?" I did. Stored on a laptop I kept on the desk in our home office. A laptop I left open most evenings. She hadn't guessed my passwords. She hadn't needed to. She'd watched me. Or she'd simply waited for me to step away from the desk and helped herself, the way you help yourself to something in a room that's always been yours to access. 4 years of shared space. 4 years of me never once thinking to protect information from the person I slept next to. I had to step outside. I stood on the back porch for a while, looking at nothing in particular. At the neighbor's fence, at a bird feeder that needed refilling, at the ordinary Saturday afternoon of my block, carrying on completely indifferent to the fact that everything I thought I understood about my life had just been quietly restructured around me. My friend came to the door after a few minutes. He didn't say anything. He just stood there with me for a little while. That was the right call. When I came back inside, I asked him the question that had been forming since 1 a.m. the night before. Is this something she could have done alone? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, The forged notary work on the LLC documents. That's not a DIY job. Someone with a notary license and access to the right equipment produced those. And the LLC amendment filing was submitted through a registered agent service she swapped in 6 weeks ago. That kind of swap requires someone on the inside of the service, or someone who knows how to create documentation that holds up to a surface-level check. He paused. This is structured, Daniel. The amounts under transfer thresholds, the LLC as a pass-through, the timing. Someone helped her plan this. Someone who's done it before, or been around it enough to know the steps. The text message. I showed him the text message. He read it once, then again. Notary appointment Monday 9 a.m. Bring both copies. Joint account screenshot. Clean by Tuesday. He turned the phone toward me and pointed at one word. Clean. He said exactly what I'd thought Saturday night. Money people use that word in one context. Then he said, whoever sent this made a mistake. They sent it to your number instead of hers. Which means your number is either very similar to her contact number in their phone, or you're saved under a name adjacent to her name, or they were moving fast and grabbed the wrong contact. He looked at me. Either way, they don't know you've seen it. That's your window. How long before the Monday appointment? It was Sunday at 1 in the afternoon. Approximately 20 hours. I called an attorney. Not the one Melissa and I had used for the LLC formation, because that felt immediately wrong, but a different one, a name I got from a colleague who'd been through a complicated divorce 2 years prior and spoken highly of someone who moved quickly and thought ahead. Her name was Patricia. She answered on the second ring, which told me she either had Sunday hours or was the kind of person who always answered. Probably both. I explained the situation in order, without editorializing. The text, the LLC documents, the forged signature, the transfers, the LLC bank account, the notary appointment Monday morning. She was quiet through all of it. When I finished, she asked me 2 questions. 1, did I have copies of all the documents, secured somewhere other than the shared home network? 2, had I made any contact with Melissa about any of this? Yes to the first. No to the second. She said, good. Both of those. She told me not to contact Melissa before we spoke again. She told me not to alert the bank directly yet. She told me to come to her office Monday morning at 8, 1 hour before the notary appointment, and to bring everything. Then she said something I've thought about many times since. She said, Daniel, when the wire was set to clear Tuesday, where were you supposed to be Tuesday? I hadn't thought about that. I pulled up my calendar. Tuesday morning, I had a site visit scheduled 2 hours outside Denver. An early start, which Melissa knew about, which meant she had calculated a window. Not an 8 p.m. window this time. A 2-day window. While I was away Monday night, Tuesday morning. She would have had the notary work finalized, the LLC transfer executed, and $63,000 moved cleanly through an LLC that now bore only her name and a forged version of mine, into an account I had no visibility of. Patricia said, she wasn't just taking money, Daniel. She was building something she could walk away from. She paused. Who handles your mail? We split it, I said. She handles more of it. Patricia was quiet for exactly 1 second. Check your mailbox right now, she said, and document everything before you touch it. I went to the mailbox. There was an envelope from the Colorado Secretary of State's office, dated 4 days ago. Inside was a formal notification of a registered agent change for our LLC, processed and approved. Below it was a second envelope, smaller, return address a legal services company in Aurora I didn't recognize. Inside was a document that took me a moment to understand because the language was dense and the implication arrived slowly. It was a preliminary property assessment request, filed under the LLC's name, for our house. Our house, which Melissa and I jointly owned, which had been quietly attached to the LLC's registered assets in a filing I had never seen and never authorized. If the LLC transferred ownership, so did our house. I sat down on the front porch steps with both envelopes in my hand. The neighbor across the street waved at me on his way to his car. I waved back on reflex. He had no way of knowing what I was holding. Most people don't know what they're sitting next to. I photographed both documents and sent them to Patricia. She called back in 6 minutes. Her voice was the same as before, measured, precise. But with something underneath it now that hadn't been there before, a quality of focused urgency that told me she'd upgraded her assessment of the situation. She said, Daniel, I've seen aggressive asset structuring before, but attaching a jointly owned primary residence to a privately converted LLC 2 days before a scheduled wire transfer is not improvised. This is the work of someone who has studied how to move assets across legal structures quickly and with minimal trace. This is not her first time doing this. I need you to understand that clearly, because it affects everything about what we do in the next 14 hours. I understood it clearly. Patricia made 2 calls that Sunday afternoon while I sat in my kitchen with Jake and every document I owned, spread across the table in organized piles. The first call was to a contact in the Denver County Recorder's office, someone she'd worked with professionally for years, who confirmed that the LLC property filing had been received but could be flagged pending a fraud review, which Patricia initiated immediately. The second call was to a detective I will call Detective Marsh, because his full name is not mine to share. He and Patricia had a professional history, the kind built on years of cases that crossed between civil fraud and criminal investigation, and he picked up on the second ring the same way she had. She handed me the phone without preamble and said, "Tell him exactly what you told me." I talked for about 5 minutes straight. Detective Marsh didn't interrupt. When I finished, he asked me for the unknown phone number from the Saturday text. I gave it to him. He was quiet for a moment while I assumed he was running it. Then he said, "The LLC registered agent your wife swapped in 6 weeks ago. What was the name?" I told him the company name from the documents. He went quiet again. Longer this time. The kind of silence that precedes something that restructures everything. He said, "We've seen that company name before. It's a shell. It's been used as a registered agent pass-through in 2 prior fraud cases in Colorado. One in Grand Junction 2 years ago. One in Fort Collins 18 months ago. Both cases involved a married couple's shared assets being quietly moved through a converted LLC before one spouse disappeared." He paused. In both cases, the spouse who disappeared was never the one on the official paperwork. He paused again. "Daniel, in both cases, the initiating spouse had a known associate who provided the notary work and the legal structuring. A man whose name has come up consistently but who we have never been able to directly connect to a crime scene or a specific document." He said a name. I'm not going to write it here. But he said it the way you say a name you've said many times before, with the particular flatness of a frustration that has accumulated over years. He asked me for Melissa's full name as listed on our marriage certificate. I gave it. He was quiet for almost a minute. When he came back, his voice had changed in a way that I recognized by now as the tone professionals adopt when they are about to tell you something that will require a moment to absorb. He said, "Daniel, the name you just gave me. We have a flag on it. Not Melissa Carr. The name she used before yours. Under a previous marriage in New Mexico, 3 years before she met you. That marriage ended with the husband losing most of a real estate inheritance through an LLC conversion. The case was never prosecuted because they couldn't establish clear fraud versus a bad business decision. But the name, the structure, and the associated party are the same." He took a breath. "This is the second time she's done this. At minimum, I'm dispatching someone to monitor the notary's office location you identified. And I'm going to need you to stay exactly where you are tonight and not make contact." I put the phone down on the kitchen table. Jake was watching me from across it. I looked at him and said, "She's done this before." He didn't look surprised. He looked like someone confirming a weight he'd already estimated. He poured me another cup of coffee and pushed it across the table and didn't say anything else for a while, which was exactly right. The notary appointment was at a UPS store in Cherry Creek. I know this because Patricia told me afterward, because I was not there. I was in Patricia's office at 8 Monday morning, then in Detective Marsh's office at 9:30, giving a formal statement, signing documents that would freeze our joint assets and flag the LLC account. Melissa walked into that UPS store at 5 minutes past 9 with a leather folder under her arm and a man I had never seen in any photograph, in any memory, in any story she had ever told me about her life. Detective Marsh's team was already there. The notary, it turned out, had a suspended license in the state of Colorado. The man with Melissa had a prior in Nevada for document fraud. They were both taken into custody before the appointment concluded. The copy she'd brought, both sets, were logged as evidence. My phone rang at 9:48 a.m., Detective Marsh. He said, "We have her." Then, after a pause, "We also have him." He confirmed the man's identity. The same name he'd said to me the night before. The associate who had appeared in both prior cases, who they had spent years trying to connect to a specific document, a specific transaction, a specific crime. He had walked into a UPS store in Cherry Creek at 9:05 a.m. and handed detectives exactly what they needed. I sat in Patricia's conference room for a long time after the call. Her assistant brought me water. I didn't drink it immediately. I just sat there with the window in front of me and the Denver skyline doing what it always does, being completely indifferent to individual human events, and I thought about 4 years. The paint on her forearms, the open cabinet doors, the inability to parallel park. The Tuesday morning, I'd been scheduled to be 2 hours outside the city, which she had known about, which she had built her timeline around. She'd asked me about that site visit 2 weeks ago, in passing, over dinner. Big project? Long day? Casual, warm. Manufactured, every word of it. Her legal name, the name before Melissa, before the New Mexico marriage, before the identity she'd handed to me across a crowded birthday party on a rainy Tuesday night, is something I learned formally from Detective Marsh 6 days after the arrest. I'm not going to use it here, because it belongs to the case and not to this story. What I will say is that she was 36, not 31 as she'd claimed. That the biography she'd given me, the childhood in Michigan, the parents who'd retired to Florida, the sister Lauren, none of it was verifiable. Lauren existed. Lauren was real. But Lauren was a woman she'd befriended years ago, who had no idea her name and family structure had been borrowed as background detail for a life that wasn't real. Lauren found out through a detective's phone call, and, from what I understand, did not take it particularly well. The man she'd worked with received 4 years and a federal fraud charge that will follow him considerably longer. Melissa received 6. Patricia told me 6 was lower than she'd have liked, but that without a third confirmed case the prosecution had less leverage than she'd hoped. I testified. I sat across a courtroom from the woman I had believed was my wife for 4 years, and I answered questions in a clear voice, and I watched her face while I did it. She looked at me the way she'd looked at everything, with a composure that I had once read as confidence and now understood as something with no feeling in it at all. She never looked away, she never looked down. She watched me testify the way someone watches a situation they are still trying to find an angle on, still running calculations, still looking for the move that hasn't been made yet. I don't know what she found, if anything. I finished my testimony, and I walked out, and I did not look back. I recovered most of the transferred funds. The LLC account was frozen before the Tuesday wire cleared, which is the entire reason Patricia had moved as fast as she had. That was the clock she was watching. The property attachment to our house was reversed by the county recorder before it could be formalized. The brokerage account funds were partially recovered through a bank fraud claim. The remainder is still in dispute. I check on it. Occasionally, the way you check on something you've decided not to need but haven't fully let go of. My grandfather's investment sat in that brokerage account for 11 years before she found it. I think about that sometimes. The way something can wait quietly in place for over a decade, and then the wrong person finds out it exists, and suddenly it's in motion. I still live in Denver. Different neighborhood. I sold the house, which felt correct in a way I didn't need to analyze too deeply. I have a new system for financial accounts now, one my friend Jake helped me set up. Separate passwords, 2-factor authentication on everything, and automatic alerts for any transaction over $50 on any account with my name on it. Not because I'm paranoid. Because knowing in real time is better than finding out later. That's not a complicated lesson. It's just one I learned the hard way, and I'd rather say it clearly than let someone else learn it the same way. Some mornings I still think about that Saturday night on the couch. The television low, the week wrung out, the phone buzzing on the cushion beside me. The half-second where I almost didn't look at it because I assumed I already knew what it was. 1/2 second of ordinary inattention. I happened to look. I happened to read the whole thing before assuming it was nothing. I happened to stay quiet instead of calling her immediately. None of those things were strategy in the moment. They were just what happened. But each one of them mattered in a way I couldn't have understood until much later, when I could trace the whole shape of it backward from the end. The text was a mistake. Hers or his or both of theirs. It doesn't matter now. The point is that the plan they'd been building for months, patiently and carefully, and in plain sight of me, came apart on a Saturday night because of a wrong number. And I was the wrong number. I just happened to be paying attention, for once, to something I didn't expect. I don't know if I'll get married again. That's not the kind of question I'm equipped to answer right now. What I do know is that trust is not a passive thing. I used to think that trusting someone completely was the highest form of love you could offer them. I understand now that love and observation are not opposites. You can hold someone fully and still be awake. In fact, sometimes being awake is the whole point. Because somewhere out there is a person who is counting on you not to be.